Whenever I want to introduce my work to prospective clients, I take them to my own home in the Edgartown Historic District. My house is a 1790 midshipman's house that in the early 1800s, that family built a barn at the back of the house. And in the late 1800s, the family grew into the barn space and then created a livery stable at the rear of the property. I came across the property and it had been basically abandoned, and I restored the house, moving from the house forward. There was a tavern room on the left side of the house. We preserved all of the woodwork and the paneling and restored the Rumford fireplace. We also restored the front parlor with its fireplace. We introduced a small bar area. We created a family gathering space where the barn was at the back of the house and left all of the barn structure exposed and all of its timbers. And where the horse stalls were, we inserted a kitchen. Then moving further back in the property, the livery stable was converted to a carriage house with the guest apartment up above, and the space between the livery stable and the barn became a landscape courtyard with a small swimming pool. After I take people through the property, they just say it's amazing how you preserve so much of the original house and the pine floors and the detail inside the house and the timbers and the beams in the barn and the bubble glass over the entry door at the main body of the house. And then I come clean. I tell them that it's not a renovation. I built the house from scratch in 2003. I invented that entire story to help me create a design that would be believable. They can't believe it, but I usually do get hired at that point. I think people respond to my work, even though I may have deceived them in the beginning, because there's a sense of authenticity and genuineness to the way my houses feel. I think of myself not just as an architect, but also a storyteller. When I do renovations of existing houses, I actually do go through the archives and really find out who did live in the house and what is the history. But oftentimes with new construction, it may be a vacant piece of land, so we take the latitude of creating our own storyline, perhaps based on historical data of the time. If the neighborhood was built in the 1800s, we may create that great uncle who built this house because he came in from his ship and decided to be landside for a number of years and then opened up a tavern in the house. So we make it up, and there's lots of different ways to do that. And I think it's very effective in getting people to feel comfortable with the design direction that we would be presenting to them. One of the things that I found by scripting a house is that it gives people a chance to understand the design direction that a house may take as we start to develop the design vernacular and vocabulary of what the house is to be. It also helps them understand why I like to take a program, albeit perhaps large, and break it down into pieces. In other words, take a position where you could have outbuildings versus one big large house as another way to explain how people could live in a more realistic way. The families can be together when they want to be together, but also at the same time have other places on campus, if you will, to go. So this idea of scripting really helps myself as the architect and the client get on the same page. What's so unique about New England architecture is that it's really evolved over a long period of time. And what I mean by that is, particularly when you think about residential areas, going back 300 years ago, most typically there was a house. And then over time, that house may have grown at the rear, and there may have been an addition put on the house. And that from that addition may have been another addition, always stepping down in hierarchy from what was the original house. And then oftentimes there would be outbuildings, be it barns, chicken coops, carriage houses, garages. whatever that may be. And having studied all of this, I realized that in creating new architecture, there are some lessons of the past that apply to today. So in my houses, I tend to use the narrative or the script to help define how a house may have grown over time. If it's a renovation in this area, it typically has its own real story. If in fact I'm designing a new house from scratch, I tend to look to the past in terms of how things grew from a hierarchical point of view and apply that to the new house to be. So for example, if this was, say, a federal colonial design of sorts, and it had a portico, let's say, at the front, or a farmer's porch, if it was in that character, it might have come across the front, and that there were a second floor and maybe an attic that was there, and that the kitchen in the new house might have been something else, could have even been could have had a tavern door in it if it was a wayside kind of a building. And then there might have been an outbuilding that was the latrine and a barn. So when you start to take programs and break it apart, you can create a narrative. You can create a script of how this house may have grown over time. And in doing that, you're really being able to break the mass and scale down of someone's program that might be on the large side. And it can also start to relate to what is around you. And these are some of the devices that I use in my work today. And it particularly helps me when I start to think about writing the narrative or the script of the house to be.